Hello, listeners. Welcome to season 2 of the Masters Decoded podcast. I am Manish Merchant, the chief decoder. I want to thank you for the overwhelming response to season 1. Your feedback and encouragement led me to bring you season 2 of the Masters Decoded. The season will tap into how technology, artificial intelligence, and other socio-economic factors have impacted my guests' careers or passions. My next guest on today's episode is Debabrat Mishra, also known as Debu. He's a founder, advisor, startup enthusiast, and a coffee aficionado. His love for coffee started on a fascinating personal journey, and today, his startup, the TribeOProject, is helping the indigenous tribes to reap the benefits of coffee plantation, growing, and processing. Please grab a coffee and listen to his exciting journey. Hi, Debo. Welcome to Masters Decoded second season, the podcast series. Really glad to have you on board.
Thanks, Annie. It is my pleasure to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
No, it's a pleasure, and you and I got connected on one of the clubhouse sessions, which was a very interesting conversation about the coffee. And when I heard about what you are doing and what you are focused on, got me intrigued, and I said, okay, let me see whatever I can help in a way with the initiative which you are focused on, which is very novel. That got me interested, and I said, we should have Devo on the show, and that's how we are today. So, talking about coffee, you know, many people, I'm sure, don't know about TribeOProject, the initiative which you are focused on, but people might be having their coffee in every day, either
Right.
through direct through buying the coffees which you all roast directly or through some partners. So if you can share what TribeOProject is all about, I think for the audience, that would be really great.
Oh, great. So, interestingly, I started off exploring coffee around the time that I was planning to quit smoking. So, this was,
Oh, wow.
I think, around about 2009. I finally decided that I had to give up smoking. So, I haven't smoked. I've been a non-smoker ever since. And coffee was my my experiment with coffee was a fix to get over my need for smoking a cigarette. It didn't work, but I got to like coffee, and I was brewing coffee at home, so I started off. But it was, it was generally a kind of a fashionable thing to do once in 2 weeks or so. But my real connect with coffee happened around about 4 years ago when I realized that the coffee scene in India was becoming very interesting. So my travels took me to Silicon Valley. So in 2018, I was in Silicon Valley attending a executive program. It was a week-long program in one of the NASA centers on the West Coast, and they had a barista who was serving all the attendees, and these are people from across the world. So I stood in the queue. When I reached the barista, I said that I love coffee, and could you make me a black coffee and whatever you think I would like. So he looked at me and he said that, oh, are you from India? I said, yeah, I'm from India. He said, one of the best coffees in the world actually is from India, Araku.
Oh, wow.
I said,
Okay.
oh, I'm not aware of the Araku producing coffee, but I know where Araku Valley is. My home state is right next to it. So I'm from Odisha. And I said that,
Hmm.
Araku joins my home state. So I will go back and I'll try it. So I came back to India. I tried out Araku coffee, realized that it was pretty good, and then got interested in the fact that what about Koraput, which is right next door. See, I in pre-consulting in 1994 to
Hmm.
1997, I used to be kind of an investigative journalist. So I used to
Oh, wow.
run a TV serial of my own where in
Okay.
Odisha, where I would travel the state and investigate public policy issues on the ground and identify what was not right and expose it and force the government to act upon it. So we used to have this weekly serial, and we took a very interesting approach that we would pick a topic and travel the state collecting sound bites and insights around that from the people on the ground, and then come back and edit it and air it every week. So I would be on the road. So I have traveled to the nooks and corners of Orissa
Hmm.
and been with the tribals in Koraput and the region next to it. So I started finding out, saying that let me find out if Koraput grows coffee because Araku is right next door. And lo and behold, found out that Koraput actually has coffee.
Wow.
So I went across to Bhubaneswar, sourced some of the coffee that was being sold as Koraput coffee, found that it was terrible,
Okay.
and it was burnt, not properly roasted, and having my journey with coffee and trying to brew coffee at home had exposed me to realizing that roasting coffee is as important as the quality of coffee beans that you have.
Yep.
So I gave the benefit of doubt to the bad roasting impacting the taste profile. So finally managed to source some green beans. And
Wow.
I had met Suhas Dwarka from Benki in Bangalore. And
Hmm.
Suhas is one of the leading experts on coffee in India. He's a barista trainer. He runs a academy around that. He has a business which provides equipment and tools to most of the cafes in the country. So I approached Suhas and said that Suhas, I'm thinking of doing something for the tribals who grow coffee in Koraput. Would
Hmm.
you be interested to be my mentor or guide me? Why don't you become my business partner? And Suhas said that if you want to seriously do this for the tribals and the benefit of those people who are involved in this business, I am all game to become a part of the business. So that's how we started off. We first sourced green beans. So we started in May last year.
Okay.
We sourced green beans and then partnered up with a couple of cafes,
Wow.
Mark's Cafe in Auroville and Dope Coffee Roasters in Bombay. And we said that we have this interesting project we are doing. We are supporting tribals. Would you be interested? And they said that if you're doing this for the development of the tribals' livelihood, we will
Hmm.
definitely give it a shot. Give us some of the coffee and we'll give it a go. They roasted it and came back with feedback saying that this is great coffee and
Hmm.
it's turned out really good. And we are running out of stock, so can you source some more? And in the middle of the COVID lockdown, we had a bit of a problem where everything was sold and we didn't have stocks coming in for a while.
Wow.
That got us thinking, and we realized that a good coffee with good practices could become really good coffee. So in November, Suhas and I went down to Koraput. We set up some infrastructure there for the tribals to post harvest, to actually do a good job of processing it. And we
Hmm.
finally got some of the samples earlier this month, and
Okay.
it has turned out to be absolutely brilliant. So, and I'll
Wow.
tell you more
Congratulations.
about that. Yeah, thanks. So we ran some experiments. So in November we started with the experiments, and that's bearing fruit now. The coffee will be available in the market in April.
Okay.
We have like 4 or 5 Indian roasters who have already confirmed that they are going to, buy Koraput coffee and roast it and sell it to the customers. And we also have a couple of roasters from the Middle East who love the coffee and they're also picking it up. I was on a clubhouse chat on Friday
Okay.
the with the American Food and Beverages magazine editorial team, which hosts it, and I told them the story about Koraput, and they loved it. And the founder of Intelligentsia Coffee of the US,
Hmm.
Jeff Watts, he was there, and he said that it sounds like a great story, and we are hopeful that this year we should also kind of take the tribal story of Koraput and make the American consumers and European consumers also become familiar with it. So that's the journey, from drinking coffee to getting into the trade was all because of coincidences rather than anything else.
I should not say that you should thank smoking, but somewhere you should thank smoking because you wanted to get out of that habit and get into this coffee drinking, which got you so uh, you got a liking for your coffee so much that today, you are beginning to trade in it, which is amazing as a story. And how you landed up in NASA for executive program, and you realized, in India they say that ghar ki murgi dal barabar. You went there
True.
to realize that your own uh, neighborhood actually brews or grows the best coffees which you will probably get around the world. So that's an interesting how things came back to you around where you started your journey from.
That's great. That's correct. That's correct.
So we'll talk about Clubhouse also and how that is helping your business grow further. But you mentioned something about tribal, and you went across and in Korapur, or the other parts of where you're looking at coffee. But this tribal community is not business friendly. The reason they are tribal is because they are within themselves. They don't want the outside world to come and infringe on what they're doing, their process. And from a commercialization and from a globalization, they are very far off. How are you able to build trust with them? How are you able to go ahead and work with them uh, to build confidence that you are not going to do anything wrong, which prohibits or shortens their business focus?
So see, the tribals, I would define tribals or the forest dwellers, the
Mhm.
indigenous tribes, as having three or four distinctive characteristics. And I have seen, uh, tribals or interacted with tribals across various geographies within India. So, for example, one of the things that they do is that they worship nature.
Yep.
So they worship nature and everything that is natural. So that's a great thing to understand. So how they believe that God has bestowed those gifts, and they
Mhm.
should protect those. Second is that they are simple people. So their aspirations and ambitions and what they want out of life, they are happy with simple things. So
Mhm.
that's a second element. But the third thing is that they also are evolving over a period of time. So if
Yep.
I were to give you a very simple example of the tribals that we are working with. So when I went and met them, I went to their homes. Suhas and I both visited their homes, their villages, and we were taken aback by three or four things. So first is they don't have electricity or power availability throughout the day.
Oh
So,
wow.
by the time we were returning, it was pitch dark, and it was difficult to, imagine how they could live in that kind of uh, situation. The second is that they don't have any telecom connectivity. So, I'll tell you a funny story about how I stay connected to the tribals that we work with.
Mhm.
So, if I want to speak to the tribal leader about the
Mhm.
coffee, I send him a voice note on WhatsApp. And in the evening at around 6 or 7, he or his son would come to a hillock and stand on top of it, and the voice note will be delivered to them.
Oh
And
wow.
if I have asked them, if I have requested them to call me, then they would call me then, and I would speak to them, and we would have a discussion. And this process repeats every day. So it's not that they have connectivity in the village. So the day I was the week that Suhas and I spent in those villages and the vicinity, we had almost zero connectivity for most of the time. So we had to come back to the townships. So they lead a very simple life, and a life which has many constraints around them. Now, they obviously are getting, so they have WhatsApp, they have mobile devices. They're getting exposed to modernity and how the world is evolving. So
Hmm.
they're beginning to build aspirations, but they're not greedy like some of us would have evolved over a period of time.
Yeah.
So what we are doing is that we are telling them that how this commerce or what they are doing with coffee, how it is loved by people across the world, how it is giving Koraput a good name, why it is nice of them to continue to improve the quality of the beans, why it is good for the livelihood and the sustainability practices that the villagers practice, and why the good name of Koraput in the future will even yield far greater good for the next generation. So this is the kind of conversation that we have been having with them. And the fact remains that they are exploited lot. So you
Hmm.
talked about Araku coffee. Now,
Yeah.
90% of Koraput coffee is purchased by middlemen and is sold as Araku coffee because it's right across the border. So they just walk across the border, go to the village heart, buy this or lend money to the tribals. And when they harvest, they just pick up the stuff, carry it across the border to Araku, and then it is sold as Araku coffee.
Oh wow.
Because Araku coffee is more popular, they make a huge margin on it, but the tribals don't benefit. So one of the battles that we are fighting on behalf of the tribals, and they are aware of this, is that we are telling them that 90% of your coffee is sold as Araku coffee. There is no Koraput recognition of Koraput in that. Let's first make you recognized and admired for what you're doing with the coffee,
Hmm.
and this will lead to far better prices for you, so better livelihoods, better income, and that's something that they have really understood well. And therefore,
Okay.
in this next harvesting season, we will actually set up a very large facility there to handle, instead of letting this 90% of coffee go across the border, we would try and ensure that it gets processed and the quality standards are met. So, and Koraput coffee has much more volume and is recognized rather than being palmed off as Araku coffee. So that's what we're doing. So if you spend time and you give the tribals the explanation, they are appreciative of it and they are interested in creating a better life for the future generations. So the tribal chief that we are working with, one of the tribal chiefs, his
Hmm.
both sons are engineering diploma holders.
Oh wow.
So yeah, one is mechanical, the other is civil, and they are in the village, finishing their education. So I have taken on the role of helping them find jobs. And what kind of an HR consultant would I be if I can't help the really deserving and the really needy? Just
Hmm.
imagine a tribal chief who has an aspiration of making his sons engineers in a
Hmm.
remote corner where there is no mobile connectivity and there's hardly any electricity. So that's a story which is inspiring. So I do hope that both his sons become successful
Yeah.
and the coffee also becomes successful. So we have two stories to tell from Koraput.
This is just beautiful what you just said. There are these simpler worldly pressures, I would say, very city dwellers or so-called tier one city dwellers don't appreciate. Like you spoke about the connectivity piece. Today, we get upset with either of the telecom providers or any of our local cable providers that they can't provide proper connectivity. Even, just our call today, you sitting in one part of India and I sitting in one part of India doing this, we will be getting upset with our providers if the internet is choppy. But just thinking about these individuals who don't care. Yeah, they would go ahead and care about it if it really impacts, but it's not like they can live without it for the entire day. They just have need it for the evening session where they have it with you. And it's such an amazing story to hear from you and what you're doing, Debu. And you spoke about being an HR consultant. You you had your big part of your career, I would say almost 30 years, Debu. You've spent in
Yeah,
HR.
yeah. 30
Uh,
years overall, out of which around about 20 odd years in HR.
from HR to being a CEO now, how did that transition come about? Like, what got, I believe you moved on from a corporate career just during the pandemic as well. How
Yeah.
did that, meaning you just said it's enough, it's done, or something
So
else happened?
so let me begin slightly earlier because this is
Okay.
the third time I have given up a corporate career.
Okay.
And my first, so I did my MBA in marketing and systems. I landed up working in advertising. And then I quit my first employer and became an entrepreneur. So I became an independent, marketing and advertising professional. Went back to my home state and tried to build something interesting. And during that time, I diversified into ad filmmaking. From ad filmmaking, I diversified because in those days in Orissa, where I was based, there was not enough post production facility for processing ad films or to edit it. So I had to
Hmm.
travel all the way to Chennai to, get the ad film edited. And I that got me thinking, saying that, why not set up a state-of-the-art facility in Orissa? And we did that. But you don't have enough ad films to make throughout the year. So what do you do with the capacity? So we got into making television serials. So I became from an ad filmmaker, I became a television serial producer, director. I had to learn editing because that was digital editing we were introducing for the first time, and there was no trained resource. So I had to learn editing on my own, and I became an editor, making television serials.
Hmm.
And from there went into investigative journalism because we got an opportunity to do a weekly investigative news magazine for television. So I became a journalist, and after that, PricewaterhouseCoopers approached me saying that we need somebody who has this background in communication to help us with the power sector reforms, communication, and change management. Would you be interested? And so, by that time, because of the investigative journalism, the state government had become very, very anti our business because
Hmm.
every week we were unearthing some issue with the government policy or what was going on, and they had almost squeezed us out of all forms of revenue or income, and we didn't have any revenue. So I said that this is the perfect timing, and I joined PricewaterhouseCoopers for the change and reforms. Then moved on to Anderson, and then finally into Hewitt, where I started doing HR consulting. In 2010, during the financial crisis, I quit my corporate job with Hewitt. I was based in Dubai then, and took a one
Okay.
and a half year sabbatical because I was almost very close to burnout, traveling, taking 20-23 flights a month,
Wow.
traveling across Middle East and North Africa. So I took a sabbatical, saying that, what should I do? Decided to come back to India, set up a startup, did that startup. Again, that startup failed because we were too ahead of our times. We were running an edtech startup trying to make online learning free for the students, school students in India. And
Hmm.
we ran into brick walls of various sorts, and we finally shut down. Lost all my life savings, and I went back to a corporate job, which I finally again quit last year during the pandemic
Hmm.
because I was working very closely with startups, and I realized that I needed the freedom to be able to do what I needed to do with startups. And since I had the confidence of quitting during one crisis, which was the financial crisis in 2009-10, I said that, this is perfect timing. I would learn much more if I was trying to reinvent my career rather than continue with what I was already doing. And it has been a great learning journey. 1 year it started in April, launched two startups which went live by December. So the coffee project went live in May, and the Work Life app, which is the other startup that I have, which
Hmm.
curates content for working professionals, that went live in December. It's in beta still, but both two startups going live. I have never had this, kind of a milestone year in my career, and I'm on the advisory board of three or four startups. Next month, I'll launch my third startup. So within a year, I would have launched three startups and quit my corporate career. I couldn't have asked for anything more.
It's such an amazing journey, right? When people say that adversity brings opportunity, you've really capitalized on that adversity, I would say. And during this pandemic, B2C business, which is in either in the grocery side or in the consumable side, specifically in day to day, like coffee, it's becoming a big business. And I'm sure you're riding that wave. And mental health and career development when the corporates no longer own employees in their offices, you having a work life app also provides you that opportunity. So great going. Congratulations on those two startups.
Thank
I'm
you.
pretty happy with what you're doing. Focusing on careers with HR, somewhere that is also helping, like you rightly said in one of the points, that what better HR person would I be if I'm not able to help these two young professionals? Is that really top of your agenda? Because I do see you consulting to other startups which are in HR and specifically leveraging AI to focus their strengths forward.
Yeah, see, the my stint in HR has largely HR consulting has largely been around working with leaders, so helping leaders become better leaders, helping organizations put in place better systems and processes, helping them improve the way they attract, retain, motivate talent. So I have seen HR from the improvement side. So how do you improve? How do you make things work for the organization and the talent market as well? I have never been in functional HR. So I have
Okay.
been an advisor to HR leaders and CEOs, but I have never been an HR leader per se in
Mhm.
execution. But what this provides me is a great access to friends within the HR fraternity who I have worked with. So either I have partnered with them for them to implement successful change programs in their organization, or I have partnered with them to build great leaders, or they themselves have been participants in leadership programs and so on and so forth. So I've been blessed with the opportunity of having HR leaders in my, as my connections or as my network across India, Southeast Asia, Middle East, North Africa, and so on and so forth. Now,
Mhm.
when I when I take to them stories of deserving people, like during the pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs, and I
Yep.
put out a public statement on Twitter saying that anybody who has been, facing retrenchment or has lost his or her job, I'm very happy to have a conversation with you and help you try and navigate this crisis. Because I'll try my best. I don't make promises, but I'll try my best. Reach out to me. Those who did, I did spend time with them. I had conversations with them, made them realize how to think through issues, and also shared my own journey, saying that I have quit my corporate career in two crises, and that's an experience that I can share. That how can you may simplify your life so your cost structure goes down, how you can wait and not just grab any opportunity, but wait and be planful so that you're taking the right decisions and not panicking, because that's
Mhm.
extremely important. And this helped me reach out to a lot of people. But these networks of HR leaders, CEOs, and business people, even startup founders, is a extremely useful network when it comes to helping people with their careers. So, and I enjoy doing that. I don't do it for the money, because there's no money involved, but I do it because these are lifetime relationships that you build when you help somebody think through and take the right decisions in their career. And I say that with a caveat because I don't do it for everyone. I only do it for people who actually demonstrate a keen interest in thinking through and being diligent about what they're trying to do. Because
Mhm.
I do receive on LinkedIn, I receive messages saying that, here is my CV, please help me with any suitable opportunity. I would never even do anything about it. If somebody cannot tell me that, Debu, you have uh, connections in these organizations, I'm extremely keen for an opportunity here. Could you help me with an introduction? If somebody doesn't have the time to
Yep.
go through my LinkedIn connections, find out who I could help them connect to, and request that I help them connect to those individuals or make an introduction. they are not being serious. They're just shooting in the dark and hoping that they'll land up any job.
Yeah, praying
So
and praying.
but I do help out with careers, and yeah, exactly. So my objective is to help people think through career decisions. Like I was on a call last night around the same time with
Okay.
with a gentleman who's been an ex-client, and he's in consulting, and he was asking me saying that should I go back to a corporate role, or should I continue in consulting? And I shared my perspective with him, saying that why don't you continue in consulting but have partnership with organizations which value your talent. So you become like the manufacturer who's manufacturing goods but has Amazon and Flipkart and others selling the goods to consumers. So think of yourself as a manufacturer, and not just that you have the entire, you are selling, you're manufacturing, and you're managing all of the three things together. So I enjoy helping people think through their career decisions. I don't tell them that you have to do this, but having those conversations is a great learning experience for me. And I can share my own experiences or help them to think differently from what they're thinking right now.
That's great. Debo, you've seen crisis like probably nobody else. You know, you've seen the 9/11, you've seen the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, and now you've seen that. But this time you've capitalized on it and going all in. What's different in this one?
It's just the experience and the confidence of having seen it earlier. So
Hmm.
when and for me, this is the third crisis that uh, has happened in my work life. So
Yep.
the dot-com crash, which happened around 2000. So
Hmm.
it's almost like a 10-year cycle if you really think of it. So the dot-com crash in 2000 was very similar. Uh, I used to work in Arther Anderson. The Enron crisis was a massive setback. The financial crisis in 2009 was another big setback, and then the COVID crisis. Now, when you see three crises, you don't look at saying that, oh, what goes wrong in a crisis, but you look at stories of resilience and those who still do well in life.
Hmm.
And I have always believed in one philosophy. So when I first came to Bombay, and I shared this when I go to campuses and when I speak to people, I share this with them. So when I first came to Bombay in 1991 December,
Hmm.
uh, I lived in Bombay for a couple of years. I was, that was my first job. I barely used to have money, to make it through the month, and travel by local train from Mulund to the Dadar and switch trains to come to Churchgate, where my office was very close to the Marine Drive. And the only breakfast you would get is a flavored milk of RA, which was sold near the station.
Hmm.
And then go back at night when the locals were empty. And many a times, I have traveled by the local, which is running parallel to Tulsi Pipe Road, because when you have to get down at Dadar, you cross a
Yep.
sizable stretch of the train line runs parallel to Tulsi Pipe Road. So you're hanging on to dear life in a crowded local train compartment, in the second class compartment, and you see people in Mercedes and expensive cars on Tulsi Pipe Road, and you say that what kind of a life am I leading? And cut to 2000, 2011, 2012, when I was on the other side. I was on Tulsi Pipe Road, being driven. I owned a Mercedes then, being driven in a Mercedes, and I look across at the local train. And I said that I could have never imagined that I would make this journey from the local train to what I was jealous of. So in everybody's life, there is ample progress, and we don't realize it when we are at that stage in life. So everybody does better. Everyone does better, but The most important aspect is to believe that the future is going to be brighter and better. Uh, I think that's the biggest lesson or takeaway for me in life, which I share with everyone, saying that, you know, the fact that you are working and that you're a B school student, you are in the top 5% of the country. So
Hmm.
never let anybody tell you that you are not good enough,
Okay.
because statistically you're in the top 5% of the country,
You
because
are.
you haven't seen the other side of the story. So have that confidence, and that confidence should not let anybody tell you that you're not worth it. You are worth it and you should believe in that. So I think that's the philosophy in life which helps me tide over any kind of economic recession or anything, because everybody comes out of a recession, everybody comes out of a setback. It's just the mindset which really matters.
I agree. Double clicking on one thing, you've had a corporate career, you left, you started your own advertisement and media house, you went back to corporate career, you started your own edtech company, went back to corporate, and now you're back in doing your entrepreneurial journey again. How has family looked at all of this and they said, you know, and I'm sure there's going to be some disruption on a family level. How has family supported you in this entire journey?
So see, I got married very young. So
Hmm.
my wife has been through all this crisis and setback. She's been an integral part of my journey, and she's always stood by. So she says that I do these crazy things, but it's not that she tells me that I shouldn't do it. So I believe that her telling me that I do crazy things and not stop me from doing it is kind of an implicit permission to go ahead and do it. I have wiped out my life savings twice over, and so and if, I might do it again the third time over as well. But
Okay.
that's not the see. My definition of failure is that if I do something and don't learn from it, that is failure.
Hmm.
So if I do something and it doesn't work out, but I have learned a lot from it, for me that is absolutely a definition of success. So my two startups, or my first two entrepreneurial stints, if everything was wiped out and I hadn't learned anything from it, I would have called them failures. But no, that was not the case. See, I lost money, but that money was well worth it because it gave me tremendous experience. So when I ran my own advertising firm, or I ran my own production house, and I was making television serials or being an investigative journalist, I was learning the skills of root cause analysis. I was learning the skills of storyboarding and storytelling. And I look at it as an expenditure in my education in those areas. This time around, maybe the if I lose money, then it will be investment in learning about new age technologies and sustainability at the same time. So there will definitely be some learning or takeaway from that. And in both the past cases, that the lessons that I learned from my startups or entrepreneurship not doing well paid back handsomely when I went and worked as a consultant, because I was able to share my experiences and make a living out of it.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's how I would define it. So my wife, stands by me because she knows that somewhere along the way, I will find a way of capitalizing on it. And there is always a brighter side to life. We are extremely lucky and privileged to be leading the kind of life that we are leading. So we are just it's a lot of gratitude, and we are happy with it.
Beautiful. Now, in these such situations, when you have families backing, everything else becomes easy. Uh, they were just switching gears, and the reason you and I are connected is because Clubhouse. And you did give a lot of good inferences of technology, whether it is your connect with the tribal chief and how WhatsApp voice notes are helping you to connect and be connected and define strategies for your coffee business. And you also leveraging technology to spread your message either through Clubhouse and other social media forums. How do you see technology disrupting or enabling way you move forward? And how do you plan to capitalize it further as you move along?
So see, my view on technology has always been that I have been fascinated with using technology right from the time I was in college. So I always believed that I should be a computer science student, but I was studying biology. So I did my
Hmm.
MBA so that I could get into systems because that was my shortcut or hack to get into a field very close to engineering while being a student of biology. Uh, and I have worked through. So, I have built software solutions. I have built platforms as a part of my consulting engagements, and I've always been fascinated with the power or creative use of technology in many ways. So, I see technology and this digital connectivity being extremely useful for marginalized and disfranchised population. So I'll give you two examples of why I'm repeating that pattern in my ventures over and over again. So I spoke about my first entrepreneurship venture when I was making television serials.
Hmm.
Uh, the the editing technology that I invested in at that time was the first time ever digital non-linear editing was being introduced in Odisha and Eastern India. So we were one of the first to set up an Avid setup in Bhubaneswar. What that did was that it changed the way people saw special effects and television editing. So the creative folks started imagining a different kind of creative treatment to television programming because we introduced that possibility in that market.
Hmm.
And as a result of that, the kind of storytelling that we could do was radically different than what was feasible earlier. The second time around, when I was doing the tech startup, building a tech platform to make education free, we were again looking at, I call that the Eklavya. I used to call that the Eklavya platform.
Hmm.
So the biggest problem with countries like India, and I think it's globally, even the black communities in North America have a similar problem. The biggest problem that we face as a country is the lack of access to good education for a large chunk of the population. So whether you're in villages or you don't have money, you can't send your children to good schools or you can't afford to send your children to schools, is the lack of access to education. We wanted to make education free so that everybody could become an eklavya if they didn't have a good drona that they could
Hmm.
learn from. We used technology as a platform to create that opportunity. We didn't succeed, but we did demonstrate that that was doable, and we had enough capital which came in because of the demonstration of that. We had at one point of time we had 50,000 students on our platform in 2012 within 1 year of launch, which was fabulous. We
Wow.
had done very well, but we ran out of funds and there were some setbacks because of which we shut it down. So second time around, again we are looking at technology creating inclusion of people who did not have access to education. And maybe someday I'll still launch that platform and run it because I still believe that nobody is addressing it from that perspective.
Hmm.
The third time around, so if you look at the coffee business or the work life app business, again, I'm using technology to create awareness about what the tribals are doing with the coffee in Koraput. So we are telling story through
Yep.
Instagram. We are, amplifying it through Clubhouse, through Twitter. Creating, building an experience around that. And the Work Life app is a digital platform for curating content for learners across the world around what could be beneficial for the work life. So
Hmm.
I see technology as an enabler of people who do not have access. We are breaking the constraint of access, and that's a common theme across all the three ventures or four ventures that I talked about. Now, the fifth venture, which we launch next month, is a career advisory platform.
Okay.
So we are now going to launch a platform where anybody who wants to figure out which is the career that would be most engaging for them, they
Mm-hmm.
will have scientific evidence, digital access, and a community which will help them find much more engaging careers, not jobs, but
Okay.
decisions around careers they will be able to take, which is going to make them feel much more fulfilled, happy, and engaged with the kind of work that they do. So I think my uh, common thread across everything that I have done from the first day in my career has had a very strong technology orientation.
But you are also leveraging tech, your expertise, whether if I look at it from a from the media business which you ran to the education business and now the tribal program and even the work life app and the career program, somewhere there is a deep rooted perspective of helping people out. Yes, there is a commercial orientation. I always say every business has to make money to survive. Otherwise, even if it is a non-profit, it has to make money. Otherwise, it will not survive. There is a commercial orientation, but deep rooted, you are also approaching it that you want to help people around or help the people who don't come in people's perspective, like the tribes, which you're working on from a coffee perspective. And that's great. I think there is that deep rooted message, which I'm getting today, that Devo is trying to do that. I don't know if you agree to that. I don't know if there was an implicit message, but I am getting that implicit message today as well.
Well, thanks for thanks for pointing that out. I never looked at it from the fact that I was trying to help people. But now that you say it, I have grown up in a family. So we came from my forefathers were from they're jamindars. Okay, my
Okay.
grandfather left the jamindari household
Mm-hmm.
and decided to pursue education, and he studied and he became a scholar, then he became a teacher, then he became a freedom fighter, became a
Wow.
lawyer, became a member of parliament, then became an author and a publisher. And he had deep interest in reading. He had a very wide perspective and worldview. But one thing which I grew up seeing him do is that as a lawyer who would take on commercial clients, he would also not charge a fee to poor people who would walk into his chamber saying that we don't have money, but we need your help. So, as a
Mm.
child, right from my childhood, I've seen hungry, poor people being given money by my grandfather. So, not only would he fight their cases free of cost, but he would give them money for food because these poor people will come from, interior villages of Orissa to Cuttack to meet him and have a conversation.
Mm.
My dad was a doctor, and
Mm-hmm.
my dad was in the government services, the Ministry of Labor Welfare. He was a
Okay.
doctor assigned to that. And labor welfare is a very different kind of, you live in colonies. So I have grown up in labor welfare colonies throughout my life. And at one stage, when we were living in Jumlitlaya, my dad got transferred, and the labor unions and the laborers over there refused to let him go. So he quit his government job and decided to set up private practice. But
Wow.
again, the story repeats itself. So over there, as a doctor, he wouldn't charge fees to people who didn't have the ability to pay the fees. So he would not only perform surgery or do the plasters, but if somebody had a cervical issue, he would
Mm-hmm.
make their neck collars personally by hand and
Wow.
invest that money and not charge them a rupee. So when you see that, you probably you learn the gratitude that my grandfather and my dad taught me, saying that you are privileged and you need to realize that you should do something for people who don't have those privileges. So maybe that's stayed in my mind. So I probably think that that's the right thing to do because I have seen it growing up. So thank you for pointing that out. I never looked at it from that perspective. I always thought that I was doing it because it had technology built into it. But yeah, maybe I'm more fascinated with people who are marginalized. So during the lockdown, I again did another interesting experiment. So I have always had this dream or an ambition that I should be able to convince my human resources CHRO network to
Mm-hmm.
look at talent from a different lens, which is how do you create jobs for people who are disadvantaged or disabled or the differently abled?
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you create jobs? So, why can't an organization create or craft jobs for which is suitable for those who don't have vision,
Mm-hmm.
which is suitable for people who don't have hearing and speech ability, which is suitable for people who don't have the use of their limbs. So why not deliberately create jobs which is best suited for those people?
Mm-hmm.
And during the lockdown, I worked with an ex-colleague of mine to use artificial intelligence to create an analytic platform where you just upload your job descriptions of your company and it
Mm-hmm.
breaks it down into tasks and then identifies which what percentage of those tasks and which tasks can be actually done by somebody who's visually impaired, somebody who's speech and hearing impaired, somebody who's doesn't have the use of their limbs, and so on and so forth. And it actually gives you a roadmap to saying that you could carve out these activities, and here is how you could combine it and create jobs for the blind, the deaf and mute, and so on and so forth. And it
Wow.
does it in like a couple of minutes. Now, we haven't been able to take it to market because most people got impacted by the COVID crisis. So it was a case
Mm-hmm.
of survival. But
Yep.
hopefully, as things improve, that's something that I have always had a dream of helping organizations create a far more inclusive and diverse workforce.
Yep.
Diversity in its truest sense, not just gender diversity, which I believe is a joke because you cannot say that we have gender diversity. It's a given. You're doing a disservice. You are actually disrespectful if you don't have gender diversity in your workforce. But the inclusion of the marginalized, the disenfranchised in the workforce is another agenda close to my heart, which I do hope that after the crisis is over, I'll be able to encourage some of my CHRO friends to actually use that analytics tool to craft jobs for opportunity deprived individuals, which the Lemon Tree Hotel does a great job of. And my
Yep.
inspiration comes from there. So, to create job opportunities for opportunity deprived individuals is another initiative which I would love to see the light of day.
And on that note, I'm sure Devo and my listeners would be all eager to connect with you to see how they can either be part of the initiatives which you are focused on or help in any ways. So thank you for taking time out. It's been an amazing session today. I really appreciate you taking time out. I know you're a busy person running so many parallel initiatives. But best of luck and keep doing good. I'm sure the world needs more people like you to make an impact to the society and the world at large.
Thank you, Anis. Thank you for having me on your show. And if any of your listeners, uh, need any kind of help with, a career decision or any life decision, and if they think that I could be of any help, I'm always open to, you know, be of help or be of service. If they can specifically tell me how I could do that, and I'll be more than happy to support them.
I'm sure there will be people who will be reaching out to you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Anish.
Thank you for listening in. And we close yet another episode of Masters Decoded. If you've enjoyed the episode, please you can help us out by sharing it on social media. I would personally appreciate that. It's how we can reach more listeners, and the more listeners we have, the more awesome guests I can get in touch and convince to participate in these conversations that are a joy to have for me, and I hope they are a joy for you to listen as well. You can also help a lot leaving reviews on iTunes or your podcast service of choice. Reviews are surprisingly helpful in supporting the podcast to get to more listeners. If this episode has intrigued you, I would request you to subscribe to the podcast to stay up to date and get notified to the future episodes. With that, I bid you and see you in the next episode.